Hello, this is Ian Noel Camalotis for Centertainment Media, and this is Chatterbox.
The Gold Hugo goes to the third wife. Ash Mayfair's lush, assured debut feature, which follows a 14-year-old girl as she enters a wealthy household. Mayfair's unshakable vision grants the women of this world and individually they're socially rejected, treating them as creations as wondrous as the natural world that surrounds them, as the film builds to a staggering climax that devastates and thrills in equal measure.
Wow, this is completely unexpected. Thank you. It's such a privilege and an honor. I'm so touched that here, very far from home, the story of my family history, the story that's based on my great-grandmother's life and my grandmother's and all the women that came before us is heard and received and loved. So this is for the women that came before me. Thank you.
Hello again. I'm here at the Chicago International Film Festival, and I'm with director Ash Mayfair for the film The Third Wife from Vietnam. So could you tell us first of all a little bit more about the film? Because I like what they say in here, but I wanted to hear in your words what the film is about.
Sure, thank you, Ian. So The Third Wife is a story set in the 19th century in Vietnam, and it centers around a young girl, a 14-year-old girl, who is married into a polygamous family, and she becomes the third wife of a very wealthy landowner. Loosely based on my family history, inspired by my family history, basically. This film follows this young girl, May, through the first year of her married life and traces her development from a child growing into womanhood.
Okay. Now, one of the things I noticed striking about the film too, so 19th century, so it's a little bit smaller villages. There was also an influence of Buddhism. Was that the heavy religion or the main religion at the time?
At the time, Vietnamese religion consists mainly of a mixture between Confucianism and Buddhism, and there's also a little bit of animism in it too. So it's a very interesting combination of all these elements. So ritualistically, families would follow, say, the Confucianism in their familial structure, in how children are supposed to treat their elders. But then spiritually, they believe in karma, reincarnation, and the Buddhist teaching. So it's a bit of both.
Okay. Now, the other thing that was prominent in the film, and it was just a little bit talked about, I don't want to say too much about the film, but this involved one of the characters later on, the idea of matchmaking, how there would be elders that would pair up couples together, that included for the male and their multiple wives. And could you tell me a little bit more what that was, and is that something that's still, in some ways, still practiced in Vietnam?
So traditionally, parents would arrange all their children's marriages, and it was a very dominant heritage, let's say, of a very dominant practice of the culture. It was also traditional that the first wife for any family would then arrange the subsequent marriages of the second and the third and the fourth wife, and so on and so forth for her husband afterwards. So I guess this practice, is influenced by Chinese practices, by also the Vietnamese royalty, where the king would have a queen and several different consorts and hundreds of concubines. Right now, polygamy is outlawed in Vietnam. It has been for several decades, but Vietnamese men and women are still expected to consult with their parents quite heavily when it comes to their prospective partners in marriage.
Okay. The other thing I actually like too about the film, and it goes from, because we're talking about how you still have to go to your parents in terms of marriages, and the film really also focuses on more of, you were talking about like women empowerment, because in terms of like what May's decision is as she goes, continues on with her life, it leads to the end. There's also a few other characters that want to decide with where their life is headed. It seems a little bit more looking for more freedom. Can you tell us a little bit more about at least what I saw in that film, if any of that's kind of prominent, or what you were trying to go for?
I think personal freedom is definitely a very big theme that's explored by the film. Personal freedom is explored by all the characters, in fact, and it's not just restricted to the women in the film, and actually I think there's a degree of suffering that all of the characters have to go through, living in this patriarchal society that restricts them, that favors family and social expectations over their own decisions. So you also see that the son of the family, the male heir, is also unable, right, to choose his own wife and
he had to marry who he was selected.
Who he was dictated to do. So you've summed it up already.
Well, that actually, you brought up a good point too. So there was where the son was also set up in an arranged marriage, and through some issues, it wasn't who he wanted to be married to. What happens if any of the children don't, at least in that society or at that time with the arranged marriage, don't like or choose to reject their assigned person that they've been selected to?
Then the later generations will create art like this that tell their stories. But the reason why I said that is because this happened in my family, and this was the situation that my great grandmother and my grandmother went through, and it is often a lot more common than we think. Most people weren't happy or accepting of their circumstances or of their partners selected for them by the family, and a lot of the time you don't hear of the rebellious cases, but when you do, it's usually very tragic.
So with the way you have the film, I really liked how the film was, and somebody brought up during the Q&A also, you had good use of both the dialogue the characters had, but also the lack of dialogue at certain times too, where you just let the moment play out. So with the way you did the film, and this is this is part of the new directors competition. Is this your first film?
This is my first feature.
Okay. What got you into filmmaking?
Very good question. I always knew I was a storyteller. So when I was a little kid, even before I could read and write, I was making up poetry and creating songs and telling stories all day long, and my mom would write them down, and keep records of them. So I knew that I was put here in order to embrace some kind of narrative, but I didn't know that film would be my medium. I fell in love with theater very early, and I was always hanging around the stages and doing student plays, After university, I actually trained as a theater director and worked as one for several years, and I also loved writing, so storytelling just came into it very naturally, working with actors, bringing slices of life into a medium that is elevated.
And shared for the masses too.
Right, and film became a very natural result of that as I developed my own voice over the years.
Okay. Have you thought of acting too, or it's just
I am
more
a
of like
terrible actor. I am an awful actor. Yeah, I guess there's for me anyway,
just being able to tell the story
right,
and form.
my perception of it is wider, and I think for an actor there's a lot of intense inner focus and
So tell me then, how is the film industry then in Vietnam? Because we only know a little, here in the United States, we only know about the United States itself, and then sometimes when we see films from other countries, it's like, oh, here's something a little different, but we don't really know how that country's Hollywood is or that film industry is. What kind of films are normally popular in Vietnam then?
I think my producer will be able to answer this better than I can, but I'll try my best. From what I can observe, is the booming industry is, for maybe 10, 15 years ago when they only made at most 10 films a year, now it's over 50 films, if not more. I think there's a lot of demand. People love it. People love having what is called, the Vietnamese cinema. And I'd say in general, it's a mix just like what we find in the US or in Thailand or in Cambodia and neighboring countries. People like a mixture of all genres, and there are studio-supported film, and there's also an independent community that support each other.
Okay. Have you shown this film yet in Vietnam, or because I know
Not
this
yet.
is the U.S. premiere here?
Yeah. So Chicago is our U.S. premiere, and then because of the whole festival tour that we're doing, that will take us into next year. So we'll plan on theatrical releases later in Asia.
Okay. How was it received in Vietnam?
We haven't shown it in Vietnam yet.
Oh, haven't shown it at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of a lot. This film is sold to nearly all the Asian territories. So all the campaign has to coordinate, at the same time, basically.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so a little bit, where you have to get everything taken care of. Okay. What kind of film do you like to do? I know this is your first film. What are some of your ideas of movies you would like to do? What other stories would you like to tell?
I love talking about childhood. Memories is something that really interests me. I love womanhood and child rearing and childbirth. I think now is a very good time to embrace women's voices and encourage other female artists to embrace theirs. I could spend my whole life doing that, basically. So I would love to continue, exploring themes that maybe surround where I come from, and maybe looking at Saigon next, where I grew up.
So circling back actually to the movie, because you were talking about a great time for women to show their voice and everything. Going back to May, the actress, you brought up something interesting during the Q&A. So the actress plays a 14-year-old girl. How old was she when she?
She was very young. She was younger than 14. She was 12 when she took on the role. And it was a miracle that we found her, basically. I had searched high and wide for someone who can play this role, because it's very, very difficult, demanding role. And when I found her, I burst out crying. It was just, it was really incredible.
Was she a seasoned actress, or?
No, she was a non-actor. She's never done anything like this before. I was very reluctant to offer her the role because of how young she was. But she fought for it. She called me, and she told her family that she wanted to do it. And so, we took the leap of faith, me and her mother, we trusted her. And after that was it.
She did an amazing job. I still can't believe she's just 12 years old.
She's 14 this year.
She's 14 this year?
Yeah.
When was the film made?
The film was shot 2 years ago in Vietnam.
2 years? Okay.
Yeah.
So you had that little bit of span of time.
Yeah, because I just do everything very slowly, and we had to raise money and time for post-production. I wanted to make sure everything is right before the film comes out.
Okay. What about the other actors and actresses in there? How did you find them, and what?
Well, they're a mix of seasoned actors and non-actors. So I had a casting director who worked really hard also to bring in people, but also me personally, I was traversing the country back and forth, going to every city, going to every school, finding a face, a voice, a song that would respond well.
That can really resound with that character.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of long auditions, or?
Yes. So for the main character, I saw maybe over 900 girls between the age of 12 and 16. For the other roles too, my casting director said this was the most difficult movie for her to cast because each role, they're all equally difficult with a lot of emotional depth required.
Yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier and brought up, it's the fact that a lot of those scenes were very powerful where no dialogue, it was just more of just the action and just their expressions on their faces and how they reacted to everything. And even a lot of the sounds, just like this, here's the silence, no dialogue, you can hear the birds chirping in the back, but it's just more of how the scenes move to the way it's edited, because you get to see the feeling from one scene to another, even if there's no dialogue in it. So what's next for you? What's the next project that you might be doing, or do you have any ideas?
Yeah. I want to put 110% into every project. So right now I'm focusing on taking The Third Wife to theaters, bringing it to an audience. But I am writing. I wrote a new script that is based in Ho Chi Minh City, where I grew up, and it's also a love story, but set in the 1990s.
A little bit closer to modern.
A little bit, yes, but it's also looking at womanhood from a different angle. One of the main characters is a transgender male to female person, and it charts, part of the narrative charts her journey into embracing full womanhood, but mainly it's also a love story between her and her partner.
Okay. So as we end here, I just wanted to ask one last question that I always ask a lot of my guests, and that is, what advice do you have for anyone that wants to go into the field that you're in, so in your case, filmmaking?
So this is very new for me. This is my first feature, so I wouldn't presume that I have a lot of advice to give, really. But one piece of advice that I found very helpful for me when I first started out was a speech, an interview, I think, that Ira Glass had done, and you can find the full quote on YouTube. But I will paraphrase him here, and then he said, if you're into a creative field and you want to start out doing anything, what first gets you into the arts is your taste, and your taste is excellent. But then your ability to create art will be very far from your taste, and this gap will destroy you at first. But the only way to bridge that gap over time is to put in a huge amount of work, day and night. And then eventually you'll be able to create art that you're proud of, that will embrace your own voice, and hopefully speak to others.
Well, thank you again, Ash. Hopefully the reception has been as good as you had hoped. And then we do have, you have 3 showings. We had one last night, one that's happening right now, and then one more on Saturdays. Thank you again for taking the time to stay.
Thank you so much. This is a pleasure.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.